Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar for today, Keeping Up with JobKeeper. It definitely is a hot topic at the moment. Thank you all for being with us today. So this webinar today will be presented by Kath Pollard. Kath Pollard is a workplace relations consultant with Jobs Australia. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please pop them in the questions box. Kath will attempt to get back to as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. However, if we do run out of time, Kath will respond to your questions post-webinar. So now I will hand over to our presenter for the day, Kath Pollard.
Thanks, Britt. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for attending. Yes, indeed, excuse me. JobKeeper has certainly been a hot topic and one that I have watched with great interest. Early days of the pandemic, we all wondered what was in store for those people who were clearly going to be unemployed as a result of the pandemic, and I had a conversation early days before JobKeeper was introduced and was watching with great interest what the other countries were doing around this, and the UK had introduced a welfare package in terms of wages protection. And we adopted a similar arrangement. So today's agenda will be looking at the current JobKeeper arrangements, the details of the extension to JobKeeper that were announced on the 21st of July, the relevant dates, the payment amounts, employer eligibility, employee eligibility, and we'll also take some time to have a look at some changes to annual leave, unpaid leave, the introduction of pandemic leave, and the amendments that were made to the SHADS award post-COVID. And these award amendments have been made to a number of other awards. So if you have other awards that apply in your businesses, it's quite likely that that your award also contains the same amendments. Okay, so the current arrangements were effective as of the 1st of March, and eligible employers carried on a business in Australia or were a not-for-profit organisation that operated principally in Australia. There was a category for deductible gift recipients. Needed to have one eligible employee, and your business needed to face a significant reduction in income. And there was, and that was dependent on the profit margin, 1 billion or less, more than 1 billion, and then there was a certain percentage for registered charities. And if you didn't fall within one of those categories, then you weren't eligible for JobKeeper, and therefore nor were your employees. Eligible employees, they needed to be employed since the 1st of March or to have been a long-term casual employee on a regular and systematic basis for at least 12 months prior to the 1st of March. They needed to be 18 years or older at the 1st of March, an Australian resident, and not in receipt of government paid parental leave or workers' compensation. Now, there was much speculation about the eligibility for employees, mainly because a lot of employees were excluded from being able to receive JobKeeper, particularly casual employees, and also a high number of visa holders who were in country who still remain unable to receive any government payments. And we've seen various schemes and other measures that people have put in place to assist some of those groups of employees, but we still have a large number of our people in our country who are unable to receive any form of government assistance. The ACTU, Sally McManus had much to say about this in the early days, albeit she was heavily involved with the JobKeeper arrangements and the introduction and how that would happen. And they were in fierce agreement, actually, the unions and, of course, the government, that what they wanted to avoid was large numbers of individuals having to queue up at Centrelink or apply for Centrelink for unemployment benefits. And the JobKeeper arrangements were really a measure to keep people employed and the employers to funnel the government funds to the employees and to somehow preserve jobs. And of course, this was when we were in the first wave of COVID, and everybody was hopeful, well, most of us were hopeful that we would not see a second wave. But of course, now we have seen a second wave. We're particularly hard hit here in Victoria, where our offices are located. And I guess we're all just holding our breath for the rest of the country and the other states, that the other states don't experience what we've experienced here in Victoria. I haven't seen the figures today, but we did come down yesterday, so that gives us some hope here in Victoria. So the current JobKeeper arrangements are that eligible employees receive $1,500 per fortnight, and the period of application was from the 30th of March to the 27th of September. On the 21st of July, an extension to JobKeeper was announced. And the most relevant date is that JobKeeper will now continue until the 28th of March next year. But there are some discrete changes to the payments, and certainly how a business needs to assess whether they will qualify for the extension to the JobKeeper arrangements. So for the payment amounts, from the 28th of September 2020 to the 3rd of January 2021, the payment will reduce to $1,200 per fortnight. And then from the 4th of January 2021 to the 28th of March 2021, the payment will reduce once again to $1,000 per fortnight. The employer eligibility from the 28th of September this year, a business will need to demonstrate ongoing significant decline in turnover using actual GST turnover rather than projected GST turnover. So there's a discrete difference in how you assess whether you are actually eligible. And there's further information available about the turnover tests. So in order to be eligible for the JobKeeper payment after the 27th of September, businesses and not-for-profits will have to meet a further decline in turnover test for each of the 2 periods of extension, as well as meeting the other existing eligibility requirements for the JobKeeper payment. So in order to be eligible for the first JobKeeper payment extension, businesses and not-for-profits will need to demonstrate that their actual GST turnover has significantly fallen in both the June quarter 2020, that's April, May and June, and the September quarter 2020, that's July, August and September, relative to comparable periods, generally the corresponding quarters in 2019. Now, for the eligibility for the next period, in order to be eligible for the second JobKeeper payment extension from the 4th of January 2021 to the 28th of March 2021, businesses and not-for-profits will again need to demonstrate that their actual GST turnover has significantly fallen in each of the June, September and December quarters relative to comparable periods, generally in the corresponding quarters in 2019. Now, the Commissioner of Taxation will have discretion to set out alternative tests that would establish eligibility in specific circumstances where it is not appropriate to compare actual turnover in a quarter in 2020 with actual turnover in a quarter in 2019, in line with the Commissioner's existing discretion. We can certainly provide further information about the Commissioner's existing discretion if you need that. There's a link to the Australian Taxation Office that we can provide you if you need any further information on that. So businesses and not-for-profits will generally be able to assess eligibility based on details reported in the Business Activity Statement, so your BAS. Alternate arrangements will be put in place for businesses and not-for-profits that are not required to lodge a business activity statement. For example, if the entity is a member of a GST group. As the deadline to lodge a BAS for the September quarter or month is in late October, and the December quarter or month BAS deadline is in late January for monthly lodges or late February for quarterly lodges, businesses and not-for-profits will need to assess their eligibility for JobKeeper in advance of the BAS deadline in order to meet the wage condition, which requires them to pay their eligible employees in advance of receiving the JobKeeper payment in arrears from the ATO. The Commissioner of Taxation will have discretion to extend the time an entity has to pay employees in order to meet the wage condition, so that entities have time to first confirm their eligibility for the JobKeeper payment. Now, that's a lot of information that I've just provided to you, and we can certainly provide these some information sheets after today's webinar if you'd like further information. So once again, the eligibility rules are similar, if not, I should say the same as the initial eligible employer rules. However, the employee eligibility is somewhat different. So, as we know, with the in the introduction of JobKeeper, there was a bit of controversy over the payment, insofar as some employees effectively were earning more money or receiving more income than they were before JobKeeper was introduced. particularly, for example, part-time employees or casual employees whose fortnightly income was less than the $1,500 per fortnight. So the government has changed the JobKeeper arrangements slightly in this regard. So employees who work more than 20 hours per week will receive the $1,200 per fortnight, and those employees who work fewer than 20 hours per week will receive $750 per fortnight. Then in the second extension, second extended period from January until March, the payment will reduce again, and it will reduce to $1,000 per fortnight for those employees who work 20 hours or more per week, and for those employees who work less than 20 hours per week, the payment will be $650 per fortnight. Now, there's going to obviously be some issues around 20 hours or more per week, or 20 hours or less per week, if people work different numbers of hours in any given week or fortnight. So we will see some guidance notes and rules released around that, around how we would deal with that, because no doubt there will be some employees who are currently in receipt of JobKeeper and the $1,500 who will now become aware that that amount is going to reduce significantly to $750 per fortnight, and then $650 per fortnight. And so there'll be probably a push to ensure that those people have their hours increased. So just be mindful of that, and we'll certainly be able to provide you with guidance and assistance in how to deal with that if that becomes an issue for your organisation. So they're the main changes to the JobKeeper arrangements that are going to be extended from September. And if you have any questions or you need any assistance, please let us know. So under the current arrangements and the extended JobKeeper arrangements, we saw some changes to annual leave and unpaid leave and pandemic leave that I am aware of caused a few headaches for members and for other employers. So I thought I'd take this opportunity today to touch on these issues. You may have already sought our assistance in this regard, but and also you may not be aware of the discrete changes that have been made in these areas. So with the annual leave provisions, the discrete changes that were made were that prior to the changes being made, an employee was entitled to request annual leave, and an employer could not unreasonably refuse that annual leave. The changes were discrete, but actually flipped that around so that an employer could direct an employee to take annual leave, and the employee could not unreasonably refuse. And the main reason behind this change was that some businesses who have their employees perhaps still working could use this as a means to reduce their annual leave balances and to make their profit and loss statement a little more healthy coming out the other end of COVID. I understand that there was some resistance by employees to take their annual leave, and who can blame them really, particularly if you were on lockdown arrangements. There wasn't really much you could do, but you know, the employees were consulted with and advised that this really was a means to assist the organisation to come out of COVID healthier financially, and therefore hopefully would be a measure that would assist in retaining employment and jobs post-COVID. So we'll see whether that has had an effect once we come out of COVID. Now, unpaid leave. So those employees who are in receipt of JobKeeper and who want to take unpaid leave for whatever reason, they continue to receive JobKeeper. However, I had a scenario recently where an employee wanted to go on unpaid leave, and the employer was in receipt of JobKeeper payments, but the employee's duties still needed to be done. So the job was actually there for the employee, and the employee did not want to attend work because he was concerned about COVID. And no doubt many of you have had to deal with this situation where people are fearful of coming out of their homes, particularly now given the situation with the second wave. But this employee was advised that he couldn't be stood down, or he couldn't be stood down on JobKeeper payments because his job actually needed to be done. So in those circumstances, if he went on unpaid leave, he would not be in receipt of the JobKeeper payment because his job still needed to be done. Now, just turning to unpaid pandemic leave, this is one of the changes that was made to the awards, and it's 2 weeks unpaid. Now, I think this is going to be changed because the award refers to the leave having to start before the 31st of July, and of course that date is not very far away. So I think what we'll see happen is we'll see the provisions in the awards will more than likely be reviewed, and some of those dates will be changed. So, for example, in the SHADS award, Schedule X was added, and it's entitled Additional Measures During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And these provisions operated from the 8th of April onwards and until further order of the Commission. And it says that the period of operation can be extended on application. So I think if we don't already have applications before the Commission, we will have applications before the Commission. So unpaid pandemic leave, any employee is entitled to take up to 2 weeks unpaid leave if the employee is required by government or medical authorities or on the advice of a medical practitioner to self-isolate and is consequently prevented from working or is otherwise prevented from working by measures taken by government or medical authorities in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The employee must give their employer notice of the taking of leave and of the reason the employee requires the leave as soon as practicable, which may be a time after the leave has started. And an employee who has given their employer notice of taking leave must, if required by the employer, give the employer evidence that would satisfy a reasonable person that the leave is taken for a reason given in this clause. And it must start before the 31st of July, but may end after that date. Leave taken under this clause does not affect any other paid or unpaid leave entitlement of the employee and counts as service for the purposes of entitlements under the award and the National Employment Standards. And the employer and the employee may agree that the employee may take more than 2 weeks unpaid pandemic leave. The changes to the award also included that employees could take annual leave at half pay, and that could be by agreement between the employer and the employee, and needed to be recorded in writing and retained on the employee's record. And once again, that annual leave needed to start before the 31st of July, but could end after that date. So I think stay tuned. We'll probably see some changes to the awards. They're pretty busy in the Commission with changes to the awards at the moment. So we'll certainly let you know if Schedule X of the modern awards is updated by the Fair Work Commission. Now that's the end of the presentation for this morning. We do have some time, so I'll throw to you, Britt, because you're the IT expert, and I will attempt to answer any questions that are presented. But if I can't answer them, I'll certainly take them on notice and we'll come back to you. Or if you have questions post today and you'd like to email us at Jobs Australia, we'll certainly endeavour to respond to you, or you can also obtain my contact details and then we can have a discussion if necessary. Thanks, Britt.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Kath. So we do have a few questions here. So we'll kick off with the first one. So what if a casual employee is on JobKeeper and starts to work at another organisation?
My understanding is that the JobKeeper can only be claimed and paid by one employer. So does this mean that the casual employee has left your organisation or is also working at another organisation?
We'll just wait for an answer on that. No, also working at another organisation.
Yep, so if they're working at two organisations, only one organisation can claim and pay the JobKeeper. You cannot double dip.
Okay.
So if the organisation asking the question is aware that the casual employee is getting JobKeeper from the other organisation, one of them should stop paying it.
Okay, thank you, Kath. Moving on to the next question. If the employee works exactly 20 hours per week, is it $7.50 or $6.50?
Okay, let me just get my trusty little guide here and I'll get you the exact words. In the business, who are actively engaged in the business for 20 hours or more per week. So if somebody works 19.75 hours per week, then they are not eligible for the higher rate.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kath. Are hours calculated based on pre-COVID working hours or current working hours?
I'm not sure whether I have that information in front of me. It says that it says $1,200 per fortnight for all eligible employees who, in the 4 weeks of the pay periods before the 1st of March, were working in the business for 20 hours or more a week on average. So yes, it appears to be in the 4 weeks prior to the 1st of March.
Okay, thank you, Kath. Next
and
question.
It's on average. Sorry, Britt, on average over those 4 weeks.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Kath. Moving on to the next question. How to assess work hours for eligible JobKeeper, a long-term casual employee after 27th of September?
So the casual employee is an employee who has been working regular and systematic hours for the previous 12 months, and that would be the 12 months prior to the 1st of March.
Thank you, Kath. Another question. If a worker chooses not to attend work, they don't get JobKeeper if their job still requires to be worked?
That's absolutely correct. And we've seen that in a number of scenarios. I've had a number of organisations seek advice saying, we've got employees who think that they can just stay home and receive the JobKeeper payment. And I had this very scenario with another organisation last week and this week, where we had an employee. The job is actually in Melbourne, and he's currently residing with family in Brisbane, and has been on a period of what was called special leave in that organisation, where for a period of time they paid vulnerable individuals who were vulnerable to the COVID a special leave payment, and that came to an end. And this employee, located in Brisbane, clearly has some medical issues and needs to seek medical assistance in Brisbane, and wanted to be stood down on JobKeeper payments, but his role still needs to be carried out in Melbourne. So we've said to him, you need to come back to work, or you are on unpaid leave and you won't receive the JobKeeper payment. So if their role still needs to be done, if the work is there and their duties are there and you need that person to do it, they have to come to work, or you can consider placing them on leave without pay, without the JobKeeper payment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kath. Moving on to the next question. Has anything changed regarding the rule that ACNC registered charities can exclude government grants from income for the turnover test?
I haven't seen any change to that, no.
Okay. It's based on whether they worked 20 hours per week in February, not what they work now.
That's correct.
Yeah. Will the employer claim JobKeeper allowance if the employee goes for maternity leave?
Well, I haven't read anything where the JobKeeper payment stops because an employee has commenced a period of parental leave, but I'm not aware. There was some recent. So there were some recent changes to the government paid parental leave scheme, but I don't think that was because of JobKeeper. I'll take that question on notice, Britt, because that might interplay with some other legislation rather than JobKeeper. So the question is JobKeeper paid when an employee commences parental leave? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay, so does anybody else have any further questions? Please pop them in the question box. If we have missed any, we will also come back to them and we'll send out a list of the questions and some answers to all attendees. We've just had another one come through. Do leave accruals still accrue for staff stood down on JobKeeper?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, perfect. And we've just had another one. What about staff that are on parental leave? Government paid parental leave is now finished. Can they move on to JobKeeper but still be on parental leave?
I'll take that on notice with the earlier question. I want to check the paid parental leave provisions and see if there's any interaction with the JobKeeper, and we'll certainly provide a response to those. I want to make sure that we have the absolute correct information.
Okay, perfect. Well, what we might do, Kath, is we will take all of these questions and we will provide responses to them, and we'll send that out to everybody post-webinar. This webinar is also recorded, so it will be sent out to all of you in an email, which will also include a webinar survey. So I'd like to thank you all for attending, and we do have a series of webinars up and coming. We have our next webinar is next week, Tuesday, the 4th of August. Head to www.ja.com.au to register, and just keep an eye on our events page, as we do have quite a few virtual events and webinars upcoming, which is really great. So thank you all for attending, and have a great day. Thank you, Kath.
Thank you.